They went at midnight, when the damba drums fell silent for the 3 hours of deep rest that tradition demanded between the evening celebration and the dawn invocations. Pogna Zara led him through passages Azindo had never seen corridors beneath Ironhaven's public buildings, carved from the same red laterite as the waystones, old enough that the geometric patterns on their walls had worn smooth as river stones. These were the paths of the earth-bonded, built when Ironhaven was first established, intended for the Pogna to move unseen through the settlement's foundations. The air down here was cool and damp and tasted of wet clay, a sharp change from the harmattan dust above. Water seeped through the stone in places, leaving mineral streaks that glinted in the light of the palm oil lamp Zara carried ahead of him. The flame threw their shadows long and unsteady against the corridor walls, and Azindo's shadow moved wrong lagging behind, reaching forward, never quite matching his stride. The Enskinment chamber was at the center of Ironhaven, 3 levels below the chief's audience hall. He had been here once before on the day of his candidacy, when he had walked down the ceremonial steps with 6 other hopefuls and knelt before the dais where the leopard skin waited. He remembered the humming, the weight of ancestral presence, the moment when the skin had reached for him and something had gone terribly wrong. Now the humming was different. He felt it before they reached the chamber door, a vibration in the red laterite walls that set his teeth on edge and made his shadow coil tight around his ankles. The old humming had been deep, a sound felt in the marrow, like standing inside a drum. This was higher, tighter, a whine almost pressed against the inside of his skull. The ancestral presence was still there, buried under the new vibration like a heartbeat smothered by a pillow. The original Enskinment still broadcasting its ancient signal. But something was broadcasting over it, louder, closer to the surface, drowning it the way a scream drowns a lullaby. Pogna Zara placed her palm on the chamber door. The earth-bond recognized her. Azindo felt the recognition as a pulse that traveled through the stone, a brief moment of warmth in the cold corridor. The door opened. The chamber was exactly as he remembered it. Circular, red clay walls, the ceiling carved with 1,000 years of chiefly genealogy, names spiraling inward toward the center, where the oldest had worn so thin they were felt rather than read. The dais of gray stone at the center raised a hand's width above the floor. And on the dais, the skin. The leopard hide lay where it had always lain, draped across the stone with the casual permanence of something that had occupied the same position for longer than any living person could remember. Its spots were dark with the accumulated touch of 100 chiefs. Its edges were worn soft by centuries of ceremony. It looked exactly right, and it was completely wrong. The smell confirmed it before his shadow did a faint sweetness beneath the chamber's mineral dampness. Not incense, not offering smoke. The cloying sweetness of fruit rotting from the inside, still whole on the outside but collapsing within. The corruption had a smell. It smelled like something pretending to be alive. Azindo's shadow surged forward before he could stop it. It leaped from his feet and streaked across the chamber floor, a ribbon of darkness that slid up the side of the dais and spread across the surface of the skin like ink poured on water. The shadow touched the leopard hide, and Azindo felt the contact in his chest, a collision, the corrupted vibration meeting his shadow and recoiling the way a tongue recoils from a rotten tooth. And beneath the recoil, beneath the corruption surface, he felt something else. The real skin. It was there, below the corruption, the way a living root lies beneath dead leaves, buried, suffocated, almost silenced by the false pattern laid over it, but alive, aware, and reaching. The true Enskinment reached upward through the corruption the way a hand reaches through mud, and when it touched Azindo's shadow, the connection was immediate, absolute, a key turning in a lock that had been waiting 14 months. Recognition, not the tentative testing of a candidacy assessment. The full force of a bond that should have been completed months ago, trying to complete itself now, through layers of corruption, with the desperate urgency of something running out of time. The connection flooded him. He tasted iron and old smoke, his vision blurred. For a moment he saw through the skin's memory 100 chiefs kneeling on this dais, 1,000 years of legitimate succession compressed into a single pulse of ancestral weight that buckled his knees. The real skin was not just reaching for him, it was pouring into him, everything it had been holding since it went dormant, every scrap of ancestral authority it had hoarded, while the corruption starved it all of it, rushing through the shadow link toward the one candidate it trusted.
It knows you.
Pogna Zara breathed. She stood at the chamber's edge, her hand still on the door, her face lit by the amber glow rising from beneath the corrupted skin where Azindo's shadow touched it.
It has been waiting for you.
The glow intensified. The corrupted vibration fought back, pushing against his shadow, trying to sever the connection, trying to reassert the false pattern. The corruption was strong. It had been fed by the failed bonds of 7 candidates whose power it had consumed. His shadow began to peel the corruption away from the skin. Cost hit immediately. Pain lanced up his arms from wrist to shoulder, sharp as a blade drawn along the inside of the vein. His nose bled not a trickle but a sudden hot gush that ran over his lip and dripped onto the clay floor. His vision narrowed. At the edges, gray static. He could feel his hair changing, not see it, feel it, a prickling at his temples as pigment died follicle by follicle. Each thread of corruption his shadow peeled away cost him something. Life. Time. The coin, the binding charged for work this far beyond its station. But the corruption was lifting. Layer by layer, thread by thread, the false pattern coming away like dead bark from a living trunk. Beneath it, the true geometric script of the Enskinment emerged, radiating outward, not spiraling inward. The original mathematics of ancestral succession, undistorted, preserved beneath the forgery like a message hidden under false writing. Azindo's hands shook. Blood from his nose spattered the dais. The gray in his hair had spread past his temples, now he could feel it creeping backward across his scalp like frost across a window. His stomach heaved, but he locked his jaw and swallowed the bile and held the connection because the real skin was alive beneath his shadow's touch, and he would not let go. Not this time.
That's enough.
The voice came from the shadows at the chamber's edge, not the darkness of an unlit corner. The shadows themselves, the ones that clung to the curved walls where the ceiling met the clay. Shadows that should have been ordinary darkness and were not. A figure stepped from the shadows, not through them from them, as if the darkness were a doorway and the figure were emerging from a room on the other side. The dark smock from Azindo's vision, woven from absence itself. Movement fluid, unhurried. The movement of someone who had been watching and was satisfied that he had seen enough. Tohage. Azindo recognized him by bearing, by the specific way he occupied space, by the military precision of his posture that no smock woven from darkness could disguise. Tohage, commander of the Ashvale Order, master of shadow warfare, the man who had taught Ironhaven's shadow binders everything they knew about manipulating darkness. But his face. The left side was Tohage. The eye, the cheek, the hard line of jaw that Azindo remembered from briefings and formal ceremonies. Human, recognizable. The face of a man who had served Ironhaven for 30 years. The right side was obsidian. Not scarred, not burned, not disfigured by any process that had a name. The right half of Tohage's face was polished black stone, smooth and reflective as still water at midnight, and it was alive. When his human eye narrowed, the obsidian narrowed too, the stone flexing with a fluidity that made Azindo's stomach clench. It rippled. Stone should not ripple. Stone should not stretch when a man's mouth moves, but the obsidian moved like skin, like flesh, and beneath its polished surface, something pulsed a slow, dark rhythm visible through the stone, the way a vein is visible through pale skin. The wrongness of it went deeper than revulsion. It reached into the place where the mind stores its understanding of what a human face is supposed to be, and found that understanding inadequate.
Commander Tohage.
Pogna Zara's voice was iron. She had not moved from the doorway, but her authority had expanded to fill the chamber, the earth bond drawing power from the clay walls and the stone floor and the deep foundations of the building she was sworn to protect.
You will explain yourself.
Tohage's human eye looked at her. The obsidian eye looked at something else, something behind the visible, something neither Azindo nor Zara could see.
Pugnas.
His voice came from both halves of his face. The human side produced words. The obsidian side produced a harmonic undertone that gave each syllable a depth like a chord struck where there should have been a single note.
You are too late.
Step away from the dais.
You were too late 43 years ago when you sealed the protocol.
He did not step away. He did not move at all.
You were too late when you exiled the boy. You are too late now. What have you done to the skin?
Azindo asked. His shadow was still connected to the true enskinment beneath the corruption, and through that connection, he could feel Tohage the way a wound feels the probe a foreign body embedded in something trying to heal around it.
Corrected it.
Tohage raised his right hand, the obsidian hand. It caught the amber glow from the dais and held it the way a mirror holds light, throwing it back darker.
The enskinment was never meant to chain power to a bloodline. The factions stole it, broke the circuit, used the pieces.
His obsidian side pulsed once, slow like a heart.
I am reconnecting them.
Through a copy that kills everyone who touches it.
Pugna Zara said.
They die because they bond with a fragment, a single piece of something that requires the whole.
He looked at the skin on the dais. Human disappointment, obsidian patience.
I have bonded with the whole, a third skin, not the original and not the copy, something that connects to all the fragments at once.
He touched his own face, the border where flesh met stone, where the obsidian began its slow claim on the territory of his jaw. The gesture was almost tender. A man touching a scar he has learned to love.
That is what it did to you.
Azindo said.
That is what I became.
The words hung in the chamber. The ambient glow from the dais pulsed against the obsidian half of Tohage's face, and in the pulse Azindo saw the stone advance a fraction of a hair's width, the border between flesh and obsidian creeping leftward across the bridge of Tohage's nose. The man was being consumed by his own solution. Whether he knew it or could not afford to admit it, the stone was eating him the way the corrupted skin ate the candidates. Slower, more thoroughly, but the same hunger.
The Zagale were woven into the world.
Tohage said.
I have woven myself into their system. The factions should have done this 1,000 years ago. Instead, they broke the loom and used the thread for politics.
His obsidian hand closed, opened.
I am the first person in a millennium to try to fix it. By making yourself the loom.
Azindo said.
By reunifying the system, through myself, because no one else will.
Tohage turned to Pugna Zara, and when he spoke, his voice dropped the harmonic. Just a man's voice, tired, angry, old.
You had the chance, Pugna, 43 years ago.
Izara flinched. Azindo had never seen her flinch. Not at his exile hearing, not when the Kambonaba had shouted her down in open council, not when 3 candidates had been reported dead in a single week. But Tohage's words found the crack in her iron, and she flinched a full-body contraction, brief as a blink, as if she had been struck. Her hand on the door frame tightened until her knuckles went gray.
You completed the protocol.
Tohage continued. His human eye was not kind, but it was not cruel either. It was the eye of a man delivering a diagnosis.
You learned the truth about what the enskinment really was, what it cost, where it came from, and you chose to seal it, bury it, because the cost of fixing the system was more than you were willing to pay.
His obsidian eye pulsed.
So the system kept breaking, and the candidates kept dying, and here we are.
Zara said nothing. Her jaw was clenched so tight that a muscle jumped in her cheek, and her eyes were bright not with tears, Azindo thought, but with the effort of holding them back. 43 years of carrying a secret, and the man she had failed to stop was standing in the chamber with half his face turned to stone, telling her exactly what that failure had cost.
The Damba alignment is in 4 days.
Tohage said.
When the alignment amplifies the bond, my third skin will receive the renewal. The ancestral line will reconnect not to a chief but to me, through me to the root lines, the shadows, the weaving, the earth bond, everything the Zagale built, unified. And everyone else?
Azindo asked. Tohage's obsidian side was perfectly still. His human side did not quite smile.
Free.
He said,
Free of a stolen inheritance they never deserved.
He stepped backward into the shadows, not through the door, into the darkness itself, folding into the absence between light sources with the fluid precision of a man who had learned to wear shadows the way other men wore cloth. Gone. The chamber hummed. The corruption resettled over the real skin, the false pattern reasserting itself. But the connection was not severed, as Indo could still feel the true skin beneath the corruption, still reaching, still holding on to his shadow's touch with the grip of a drowning man. Blood dripped from his chin onto the clay floor. His arms ached from wrist to shoulder. The gray had taken most of his temples and was working its way back. He felt hollowed out, scooped clean, as if the peeling had cost him not just time and blood but some essential density. He was lighter than he had been an hour ago, and not in a way that felt like freedom. Pogna Zara looked at him across the chamber. Her face was ashen. Her hands were still shaking. The flinch had broken something in her composure that had not fully reassembled.
He completed a third enskinment.
As she said,
One that bonds to all the fragments, if the alignment amplifies that bond.
He becomes the system.
Azindo wiped the blood from his face with the back of his hand.
Everything the Zagale built channeled through one man whose face is turning to stone, and the stone is still spreading. You saw it.
Can you reach the real skin?
She asked.
Can your shadow bond you to the original before the alignment?
He looked at the dais. At the leopard hide that held 1,000 years of legitimate succession beneath a layer of deliberate corruption. At his shadow, still stretched across the chamber floor, still connected, still reaching. At the blood on the stone, his blood, the price of 10 minutes of partial contact. 4 days. 4 days to strip the corruption, bond with the true skin, and complete an enskinment that had broken every candidate who had attempted it in over a year. 4 days with his hair going gray and his nose bleeding, and the binding charging him in flesh for every inch of progress.
You owe me an answer first.
He said.
Not about the skin, not about Tohage.
He met her eyes.
43 years ago you learned the truth about the enskinment. You sealed it, you buried it, and for 43 years you watched the system rot and the candidates die and you said nothing.
His voice was level, cold, the voice of a man who has learned that anger burns better at low temperatures.
You signed my exile knowing the skin had saved me. You let me spend 3 months in the veil thinking I was worthless. You watched 3 people die from a corruption you could have exposed 4 decades ago.
He paused.
So before I bleed for this skin again, Pogna Zara, was it worth it? The silence, the sealed protocol, was it worth what it cost?
The chamber waited. The drums were silent the 3 hours of deep rest, the space between celebration and invocation where even the ancestors held their breath. Pogna Zara looked at him with eyes that held 43 years of a question she had never allowed herself to answer.
No.
As she said,
It was not.
the word fell between them like a stone into deep water. No justification, no political calculus. Just the admission, bare and final, from a woman who had spent 4 decades building walls around a mistake she could not undo. Azindo held her gaze for 3 heartbeats. Then he turned back to the dais.
4 days.
He said,
I will need everything you know about the protocol, everything you sealed, every truth you buried.
He pressed his palm against the leopard hide and felt the real skin pulse beneath the corruption faint, desperate, alive. His shadow wrapped around his hand, and the contact sent fresh pain lancing up his arm and new gray creeping into his hair, and he held on.
And Pogna, if I survive this, you and I are going to have a longer conversation about exile orders.
4 days to the Damba alignment. A corrupted copy eating the enskinment from within. A man turning himself into a god, 1 inch of obsidian at a time. A Pogna whose silence had fed the crisis, she was now begging someone else to solve. And Azindo, bleeding on a dais, holding a connection that was killing him slowly, because his shadow had decided months ago and the rest of him was only now catching up. Beneath the chamber, beneath the clay and stone and 1,000 years of institutional silence, the Zagale stirred and dreamed of the system they had built and the alignment that was coming whether anyone was ready or not. The drums would start again in 3 hours. The countdown had begun.